You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the State of MedTech. For those of you who are marketers or aspiring marketers, our guest today is one that you definitely will recognize. In my opinion, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame of great marketers who have contributed to not only our industry, but marketing as a whole. And that is Neil Patel. Neil, thank you so much for joining the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Neil, you're extremely humble and down to earth, but I do need to ask you just for a quick minute for perhaps investors who are listening, people who, for whatever reason, may not be familiar with you. Can you give us a quick 1 minute highlight of who is Neil Patel? How did you get your career started in marketing? And what are you doing now?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Neil Patel. I'm a digital marketer. I own an ad agency called NP Digital, stands for my initials, Neil Patel Digital. Been an entrepreneur for 23-ish years. Most of my career spent in software as a service. Built quite a few B2B analytics companies over the years. And we work with brands in all categories around the world. I think our ad agency is in 19 or 20 countries now, 1,000 plus people. But yeah, I've been enjoying the ride. Work with a lot of big brands across all industries like Adobe, Cisco, Novartis. And the list goes on to like ESPN, CNN, Coopers, Hewlett-Packard, Louis Vuitton. I'm blanking on names, but there's just so many. Mitsubishi. But yeah, Albertsons in the United States, they're like a grocery store, right? We work with their parent corporation. But yeah, the list goes on and on.
Fantastic. Yeah. And for those who are listening, I know we have a lot of audience members who are at large strategics like Johnson and so on. So if you're interested to learn more, go to npdigital.com to learn more. So Neil, me growing up as a marketer, I got into marketing a little about 12, 15 years ago, where there's a real expansion in terms of digital. We had social media really taking off as a viable channel for B2B. SEO. Back then, these are the times where we saw HubSpot build their whole business. And so I'm wondering, from where you sit, you and MP Digital run a lot of different experiments on marketing trends, tactics, etc. But I'm wondering, if you go back 10 years, what were some of the main things that worked in B2B marketing back then that don't necessarily work today?
Yeah, so in B2B marketing 10 plus years ago, a lot of the tactics and strategies still work today. They're just more competitive. But a lot of what you would do 10 years ago is you would just run up ads on Google and Facebook. You would target more people on LinkedIn. And all these strategies work. The difference is LinkedIn is more expensive. Google ads are more expensive. Facebook ads are as well. Ranking content on Google is still possible, but it's harder than it used to be. There's a lot more players, so you got to do more conversion optimization. A lot of the same strategies and tactics work. It's just you have more players that you're competing with.
Now, that makes sense. And I'm wondering, in terms of what you just said, the problem again with having so much competitors is that it can work, but you have to spend more money. For a lot of companies who listen to our show, we have strategics, of course, but also startups. For people who are just getting started, what's the framework that you recommend to them in terms of how they should figure out where they should allocate their money? Because on one side, you can spread it thin across a lot of channels. Doesn't work because it's not enough money, but then you can pick the wrong channel and put too much money in there. When you deal with smaller companies, how do you think about that?
We think of it as spaghetti. You take spaghetti, you go throw it against the wall. When it sticks, it's cooked. So think about your marketing channels. Try 5, 6, 7, 8 of them out. Just test the waters. Think of it as spaghetti and you're throwing it against the wall. The ones that perform the best is the ones you double down on and just ignore the rest. So pick the channel that's performing the best, double down on it, ignore the rest. Once you scale it up and get it working and start fine-tuning it, and it'll never really fully be on autopilot, but when it's getting closer and closer to not requiring as much time, then go and add in another channel. So take the same spaghetti concept, take the channel that's performing the second best, and then add that into the fold and keep doing that and expand from there. You need to take an omni-channel approach, but to say from day one, I'm going to be omni-channel is just a bunch of bull. It's too much work. It's time intensive, it's very costly. You're going to lose a lot of money at the beginning. You need to think about it more strategically versus just trying to do everything. Because if you try to do everything at once, especially when you're small, you're just going to do a terrible job and waste a ton of cash.
I love that. And the emphasis here that I want to point out, especially to the investors, is the idea of going omni-channel first is the goal is to test and learn. So the optimization that you're trying to go for is learning and taking that learning, adding it to your existing hypothesis and then reiterating on that. Is that correct?
Yes.
When you think about running these types of tests, for our audience, they target extremely skeptical, difficult people to sell to, which are physicians, surgeons, etc. When you think about these kind of tests, a conversion event, let's say a lead or somebody asking for a demo is usually what's preferred, but often very difficult to get. What kind of, let's say, signals to noise do you like to look for that says, hey, this looks like a channel or tactic that's worth clicking on and putting some more money behind to get to that optimization event?
It really depends on the business and the KPIs. Assuming you know your lifetime value of your customer and you know what a potential customer's worth and how many years they pay you, which a lot of startups do not know. But if you have a rough idea of at least what a customer's worth in year one or the first purchase, if it's not recurring, then look at it from, hey, do you think you can make this profitable? If so, dive a bit more into it. If you think, wow, this is going to be hard to get profitable, we're so off, then move on to another channel.
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. ShowPad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the ShowPad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. ShowPad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/State of MedTech. Now, let's get back to the show.
And I love that you just pointed that out because, again, even though it's 2024, my industry, the medtech industry, is still learning these things, including like the customer's lifetime value, right? Or essentially, what does it cost to acquire a customer? And so your thing is before even doing these experiments, you have to understand what that profitability is for that one customer base case scenario and reverse engineer from there.
Exactly. But if you don't understand your lifetime value, it's okay. Believe it or not, most businesses don't, even larger corporations. They say they do, but they don't really fully have a number for the lifetime value. Now, when you get to these really large publicly traded organizations, of course, that's a little bit different. But what you want to do is you just want to go out there and figure out what your customer's roughly worth. If you don't know, you could say, hey, I'm selling this medical equipment for 500 grand. It's a one-off purchase. Sure, there's some software and licensing, but let's just say it's 500 grand. My margins after sales reps and all this kind of stuff, I make 50 grand in profit. If that's your number, then you got to make sure you're not spending 50 grand to acquire that customer.
No, that makes complete sense. And I'm wondering also, when you think about setting up your experiments, and again, every company is going to be different, but assuming that you're dealing with a B2B customer, and let's just say the lifetime value of that customer is going to be, let's say, $500,000, or let's make it better, $1 million. Okay. How do you think about your experiment timeline? Because a lot of times people launch experiments and they're not patient enough and they kill things off before they have time to flourish. Do you have a rule of thumb that you like to go with when it comes to companies like that?
The timeline is dependent on the marketer itself. One, your sales cycle could be really long, so it could just take a while to figure it out. But even if your sales cycle is really long or short, if the marketer running the campaigns is terrible at what they're doing, it's going to take longer to figure out versus if they're really good. On the flip side, with my team, we know in usually less than 30 days for most channels if we can make it work or not. Some channels we know within the first day or two or a week. some we know in within 30 days. It really depends on the volume the channel can drive, and it also depends on the sales cycle. But we usually have indicators within 30 days for most channels. And it doesn't mean in the first 30 days the campaigns are humming and singing and performing really well. It just typically means within 30 days, you'll know roughly what you can or cannot get it to. You should be able to estimate.
Got it. In recent years, we've had so many different channels come out. You have Amazon, of course, for advertising, but then you have things like TikTok. X changed their advertising platform. A lot of people are using that more. Have there been any social media channels for running B2B ads that have at least surprised you and your teams in terms of how well that they've performed? Anything stand out to you particularly?
Twitter has been just performing extremely well, but it's not shocking. It's because a lot of companies have boycotted Twitter in the past. Twitter, X, whatever you want to end up calling it. But it performs really well.
Yeah, and so the sense is that's a good channel because you don't have as much competition.
Doesn't drive the volume that Facebook does or Instagram does or YouTube, but it still performs extremely well.
That makes sense. What about, so just to flip it to an extremely competitive area, an area that you've, in my opinion, at least that's how you got on my radar over 10 years ago, is the area around SEO. SEO is definitely very important. It's become a lot more competitive. How should companies think about starting out and building out their SEO practices?
So the way companies should start building out their SEO practices for most organizations, what I would tell them is to go and figure out ads and figure out what keywords drive conversions.
Really? Can you dive a little bit more into that? What does that look like?
Okay, think of it this way. If you're running an SEO campaign, your goal is to rank at the top of Google. It takes a long time to rank at the top of Google. If you end up ranking at the top of Google for the wrong keywords, you get the traffic, but you got no conversions and you just wasted a lot of time and money. So if you ran some paid ads really quickly or looked at your competition and you figure out what they're spending money, typically the keywords that get a lot of traffic and have a high CPC are the ones that do really well. So if you're doing a few quick tests, you'll know what keywords are going to perform the best, and then you just double down on those from an SEO standpoint. That's if you're trying to do it in-house. If you're using an agency or you have a ton of people who are experts, you can do keyword research, look at the competition. Typically, the keywords in your space that have the highest CPC are the keywords that are driving your competition the most revenue.
Got it. That makes sense.
Not the most revenue. They're driving the most revenue per click.
Per click.
Yes,
Got it.
because some keywords don't drive the volume that others do.
When it comes to running those ads, on the creative, do you look at it as, I'll give you an example, using image ads where you just have text on the image and you use words or language that should, in theory, get the attention of your end user. So I'll use a great example, robotic surgery for hernias. So maybe you run 3 to 5 different text ads where in the text is just one color with text and it says something like robotic surgery for general surgeons. And the other one is robotic hernia surgery, right? Is that how you start thinking about what words to start targeting for SEO? Just something simple like that? Or are you thinking of a completely different approach to creative?
Yeah, you can start it through that, but with SEO, they may think those two keywords are very similar, right? I don't know robotic surgery for hernias that well. I'm not that medically savvy. And you gave 2 keywords and they were very similar. I forgot what both of them exactly were, but one of them was robotic surgery for hernias. What was the other one?
Just robotic surgery for general surgeons.
Oh, general surgeons. Okay. So I'm mistaken. General surgeons and hernia would be viewed very separately. If you're talking about robotic surgery for hernias, that content would be super detailed and would cover more than robotic surgery for hernias. It would cover everything around that topic. Imagine ranking for Abraham Lincoln on Google. I know that's very generic, but Abraham Lincoln, you're talking about presidency, White House, slavery. You're talking about a lot of different things within there. Even though you're targeting Abraham Lincoln, your article needs to encompass everything around that to be super thorough and do well. So when you're talking about robotic surgery for hernias, or even just robotic surgery for physicians, there's many different categories for physicians. I don't know what they all are. But if your article isn't encompassing all of those things, it's harder to rank versus just it being general.
Got it. That makes sense. You mentioned category, and one thing that we've seen a lot in the marketing world in the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years is the idea of like category design, which is good. The problem is that it takes a long time, specifically where you find a category and you become the spokesperson and brand ambassador for that problem. So in this case, let's say it's XYZ company, you deal with, let's say, robotic spine surgery, for example. So you become an advocate for robotic spine surgery because you're trying to push that category, thought lead that, and then your product ends up being downstream from that. How do you think about category design as it relates to like SEO and marketing? Can they go hand in hand? Is it something that makes it more difficult?
When you think about SEO, it's all actually very difficult. It's not easy. The biggest problem isn't any of this. The biggest problem is how do you so let's go back a little bit. If you're in the robotics industry for surgeons, you're not the only player in the space. There's only 10 spots on page 1. I get on page 1, sometimes it's less than 10 or more than 10, and it's not the same one, but just go with me here. Let's just assume 10 spots on page 1. Most categories are super competitive. What can you talk about that's unique that your competition isn't talking about, that people are going to be like, I have this aha moment. Oh, wow, this really delighted me. Oh, wow, this knocked my socks off. Oh, wow, I learned something new that I didn't learn anywhere else. The hardest part about doing SEO is you got to figure out how to provide value in a better way than your competition. When a space has been around for a while, I don't know robotics well, but in the healthcare sector, telemed, robotics, a lot of these things, and people have been talking about for a long time, which means there's articles everywhere on the internet. Even if doctors are using these machines and practicing it on a daily basis or not, it doesn't matter because people have been discussing these things for a while now. So that means you're having competition from day one. What can you do to stand out? That is actually the hardest thing that people have to figure out in their marketing. What can you do to differentiate yourself in a crowded space? Other than your brand, because in marketing, we really say the main differentiator these days, the real moat, is your brand, right? People don't buy Nike shoes because they're better than Adidas. Let's be realistic. Adidas can make just as good shoes as Nike or Reebok or any of the other brands out there. People choose one brand over other because of the brand. Same with cars. Tesla makes a great car, but I could tell you Mercedes has more comfortable seats than Tesla. It's not my opinion. You ask 99% of people who sat in a Tesla, they'll tell you the Mercedes seat or the Rolls-Royce seat. I don't have a Rolls-Royce, but I'm just giving you a crazy example. People would say the Rolls-Royce is just way more comfortable, right? It's just a fact at this point. But Tesla has modified their seats, have the least amount of parts to make their manufacturing more efficient. But the point I'm getting at is, how do you stand out so someone chooses your Mercedes or Rolls-Royce or Tesla over the other cars? There has to be a differentiating factor. And over time, it gets harder and harder for that. In Tesla's case, they're one of the first mainstream. They weren't the first, but they're one of the first mainstream electric car manufacturers. And it was a big brand differentiator. But now, when I go to places like Brazil, I just came from there, there's more of these BYD cars, I believe they're called BYD, than Tesla electric cars by far, right? You're seeing tons of them in the street. And you're seeing a lot of brands pop up because electric cars aren't as differentiated. Now, I know we're talking about MedTech, but it's the same thing with your marketing SEO. How do you stand out and what's going to be your differentiating solution? And if you can't represent that, it's really tough to rank. And even if your products are similar, it doesn't mean you don't have a differentiating factor. You just got to figure out what it is. And that's really important within your marketing.
I completely agree. And I think like one of the foundations of marketing is that before you're able to actually persuade, you have to be able to get attention to channel that behavior change. We talked a lot about essentially the importance of, and a theme here I'm seeing is finding ways to not only differentiate yourself, but go to areas where there's less competition because you can, again, accelerate that learning curve. One of the things that both large and small companies in my industry struggle with is this idea of creating content. It's costly, it takes a lot of time and everything. One of the levers we felt that is a big opportunity, because not a lot, I know of only one or two companies that did it, is essentially doing a podcast and using that podcast to get video content, create blogs from that, small clips and everything. Aside from, let's say, a podcast, are there any other creative strategies or approaches that you recommend to clients as a way to get content, get insights, experiment versus, let's say, just sitting down and say, okay, we're going to make content for this one ad? How do you force multiply that approach?
Yeah, so the best type of content to start with is video content, whether it's an interview like this in a podcast style, or someone shooting in camera, or someone just riffing on a presentation and it being recorded, because you got your long form content now. That's one piece. You can then turn it into audio if you want. That's a second piece, and you now got a podcast. You can also take the video clip, the long one, and slice and dice it into short form content, and now you got a third piece of content, many third pieces, because you can have a lot of shorts, and post it on all of the social networks. The fourth is you can end up taking that long form content, pick some of the best subjects, the short forms or whatnot, and turn them into unique blog posts, right? You can even have AI help you with some of that kind of stuff. That's how you do well with your content. You try to ideally start with video, and then you repurpose and you create a ton of different content types out of one.
Got it. And you said something I wanted to touch on. Something that I really admire about you and your team over at MP Digital is that you guys have done such a great job of not only following marketing trends, but leveraging both the agency and your brand to say, hey, we're going to actually get data, qualitative and quantitative, and try and understand this. So one of the areas that you really focused a lot on is AI. That's been one of the big things in the last few years. Still, a lot of marketers or a lot of companies aren't leveraging it. How do you think about using AI in these companies? What are the kind of insights that you guys have discovered from doing all these polls and collecting all this data?
So first is we've noticed that AI content gets roughly 5.4 times less traffic than human written content. Especially when you go more technical, we're seeing a bigger gap.
5.4 times less. That's a big difference.
And then when we looked at the traffic per minute spent, because you have to remember AI helps you with a lot of the content, you can use it to write. So you can crank out way more pieces of content. So maybe you can make it up in volume in the same amount of time frame. And what we ended up finding is the AI content just ended up performing just not as well from a traffic standpoint, even when you look at a visitor per minute spent creating the content, because you still have to modify the AI content, post it to the CMS, and the list goes on and on. The second thing that we ended up finding when it comes to AI is AI combined with human performs really well. We had humans create ads and AI create ads for Facebook. And we tested it with roughly $7 million in spend. I believe it was somewhere around 7, a little bit more, I believe. And what we found was the human generated creatives converted better than AI. But then when we took the winning human variations and had AI spit out variations of that beat the human variation. So AI combined with humans did even better. We're seeing the largest lift in AI, though, is with data and analytics. So most people don't know this, but over 100 billion of the spend on digital marketing each year is wasted. Bad clicks, no ROI. It's actually a little bit more than that, or quite a bit more than that, but hundreds is a low end. And when you look at that $100 billion number, and I don't know how these research people got that number, but when I Googled it, it was somewhere between the 100 and 200 range. Either way, it was a large number. And when you look at that, the biggest problem is people don't look at their data and analytics. And they say they do, and the marketers say they're using it to make informed decisions within the corporation, but it's a lot of bull. So when you have AI analyzing your data in real time, you can quickly then make adjustments and tweak from there and adjust and go from there.
That's really interesting. And I want to go back to something that you said. I just want to make sure that I understand this, because you were saying that essentially when you tested human generated content or human content made by humans versus AI, human generated content performed better. But when you took human generated content and created variations using AI, that combination beat just human generated content alone. So essentially the takeaway from this goes against what people are actually doing today. Because what people are doing today through recommendations, just their own workflow, is start with AI and then create your variations on your own from there. You're saying the reverse, which is the human should generate or conceive the ideas and then put it through AI to refine it and create more variations. Is that correct?
For ads, it varies for each different type. I'm saying when you're looking at ad creators, we're seeing humans win, but AI combined with humans, so AI helps with variations, performs better. When we're seeing with content creation, AI can help with ideation, but humans writing it performs better. AI can help you with the research, but again, humans writing it performs better. When we're looking at things like ad campaigns, we're seeing using AI from the get-go to analyze your data and give you insights, not make the changes, but give you insights, provides people with more actionable insights where the marketers internally can make changes or agencies can make changes faster, and there's way less wastage and there's more ROI. So it depends on the scenario.
Got it. What's your take on, there's a variety of companies who've developed software that, if, like for me, I have a lot of content, I can upload all that content. They can essentially take me and make a video where they can cause me to say anything, but it's still AI generated. Do you feel like that's a valid avenue for, let's say, if it's a company, Fortune 500 medtech company, their CEO is super busy, they can't sit down and make these clips all day long, but they use that as an avenue to create clips, both for organic, social, and paid. Would you recommend that? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's tools like HeyGen, which can take your content and translate it into different languages. A lot of these deep fake videos are going to cause issues, I believe, with the elections. I know a lot of these AI platforms have taken a oath or a vow or whatever you want to end up calling it to not meddle in police and stuff like that. But people are doing it already all day long. Like I was browsing X and I was seeing an ad of Harris, and the ad was pretty much purely created by AI, and you can see that. And it didn't have a community note on it. Now, I'm not trying to get political. I'm not for Trump. I'm not for Harris. I'm actually for neither candidate. I'm pretty much in the middle. Ideally, I wish we had better candidates without getting into it, but it's the two that we have. And when you look at it, these platforms should be neutral. They shouldn't be letting people create this stuff knowing that it's fake and be like, yeah, go. Because in essence, there's biasness. And a lot of the platforms are Democratic and some of the platforms are more Republican, but majority are Democratic. And their job is to uncover information, truthful information ideally, and provide it to people. And they should just not meddle when it comes to, their opinions. But what's happening with AI is it's getting worse and worse. And I think it's a scary thing. Like we had messages going around in our company, a voice memo from our CEO saying to give people their bank account access to him. He never sent that. It was AI who replicated his voice. And I think you're just going to have more and more problems. But this technology, like HeyGen, has gone way better in the last 12 months than it was previously. Still has issues. It may be 80% there, but you need it like 98% there. And I believe within 2 years, a lot of these technologies will be amazing and really ready for prime time. Just they're not fully there yet.
Do you think there's a saying in sales when you do like cold outbound or cold outreach is that the more you can automate it, the more likely it can be ignored? So like an automated email message that says, hey, first name, it's like, you can ignore that. But if you pick up your phone and record like a personal video, like the open rates on those are through the roof. Do you feel like we're entering that same kind of a thing like these days when it comes to marketing, which is the less automated, perhaps the less AI generated it is, more likely it can perform better? Do you feel like we're there yet, or right now we're still in a lot of gray?
I think we're still in a lot of gray.
Got it. Now it makes sense. I'm wondering also for you, I love following you on LinkedIn because you put out a lot of great content on there, just in terms of video content and your reviews and stuff. When it comes to your approach to your like personal brand on LinkedIn, because you have a very established agency. You guys are very, very large. How many headquarters do you guys or agency locations do you have?
Country-wise, I think we're 19 or 20, one or the other.
Okay. So the point is extremely established, but you're still very much founder-led. And I actually point to MP Digital as an example of founder-led marketing branding. How do you look at your own personal social media channels as a way to drive that top of funnel education and awareness with potential customers and prospects?
We use it as it was a company's profile. We broadcast all the messages. I'll create content. They'll promote my content and vice versa. Even though they're two separate channels, we act like they're one internally. The team manages my own channels. No joke, my team logs into my Instagram more than I do. I probably log into my Instagram 2 to 3 times a week. Right? They're literally logging in, posting for me, adding the descriptions. I'm creating the content, of course, it's me on there. but they're logging in and doing it. Plus, I'm traveling all the time and I don't have time to literally log into Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok and YouTube each and every single day and post, right? But I do have to say, corporate brand is much more powerful than a personal brand. And I'll give you some figures.
Corporate brand is more powerful than personal brand?
By far, if you look at the biggest money generators in the world, they're corporate brands, they're not personal brands. Apple is bigger than any individual brand. Like, people would be like, oh, look at Cristiano Ronaldo. I can name tons of Fortune 500 companies or even publicly traded companies that are probably not in the Fortune 500, like Fortive, that no one knows what they do, but it's an amazing corporation and they spit out billions and billions a year. But yet I can ask anyone down the street, they'll know what LeBron James is or who Cristiano Ronaldo is or Messi is, but they will not know who Fortive or Danaher is or Sensora. And these companies spit out billions and billions of dollars. In our first year of business, we did around 5 million in revenue, if I'm not mistaken. Almost all of that came from my personal brand. Our second year of business, I believe it was somewhere around 18 million in revenue. 10 million of it came from my personal brand. And then the year after, I believe it was low 30s. I know it was in the 30s. I just don't know the exact number. Our third year was 30 something million in revenue. 10 million still only came from my personal brand. And then we doubled and then kept growing from there. But even as we grew and we kept growing, even passing over 9 figures, still my personal brand has never driven more than 10 million in annual revenue. My personal brand is not as big as Kylie Jenner or LeBron James, so their number is going to be much bigger. Rihanna doesn't make as much money as LVMH. Kim Kardashian doesn't make as much money as a lot of the beauty brands out there, cosmetic brands out there, whether it's L'Oreal or Estee Lauder. It doesn't mean personal brands are bad. The ideal structure is the Nike structure. We're going to just take a ton of these personal brands and have it used to promote our corporate brand. Works exceptionally well.
Interesting. And what I love, and again, this is why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Like, you've mentioned many things already in our interview that kind of fly in the face of what most marketers are thinking about. A lot of marketers think about, oh, founder-led personal brand is going to be better than the corporate brand. Nobody cares about the corporate brand. You're saying that's not true. And more importantly, you have the quantitative data over time to prove that. And so your idea is that if you have, let's say, a medtech company, and let's say you have, of course, the CEO, maybe a couple of physicians who are, advisors, really believe in the company. Your thing is that those can be leveraged, but have that all channel in through the corporate brand.
Bingo. Look at Kylie Cosmetics. The rumor was it was a $1 billion+ valuation and they got like 500 million or 600 million. That was the only check they got. They're probably not going to get another check because the business hasn't performed as well based on the reports that are online. And the money got sliced and diced in many ways: managers, mom, partners, etc., taxes. So it's not like she walked away with all of it. I'm not trying to talk trash on her. I actually say she did an amazing job. I wish someone gave me extra 500 million or 600 million dollars. It's a lot of cash. And again, she's done an amazing job. One of the best out there when it comes to branding. But even though people talk about the Kardashians all day long and their beauty brands like Kylie Cosmetics, compare that to L'Oreal or Estee Lauder. It's night and day difference in revenue and profit. Night and day. It's just the power of corporate brands. People tend to forget them. People also tend to forget the fundamentals, systems and processes and biz dev channels and partnerships. They think social media is the sexiest thing and how you're going to make a ton of money. I'm not saying you shouldn't do social media. Facebook's $1 trillion+ company. You got to be on it. But that doesn't mean you should ignore the fundamentals. And a lot of these people who build these brands forget the fundamentals. I got 100 million followers. Let's go and let's make some money. Yeah, you got 100 million followers. You'll make some money. But if you ran the business with the fundamentals that these traditional giant corporations understand and combine that with your personal brand, that's how you build a much larger enterprise. It's a combo of both of them. Even though the corporate brand is better in the long run, it doesn't mean you can't use a personal brand to get things off the ground. Where Kylie Cosmetics failed is the personal brand got it off the ground. They didn't know how to take it to the next level.
That makes so much sense, that the personal brand can be looked at as a catalyst for the corporate brand. Once the corporate brand is moving, that makes so much sense.
Yes, like another example of this is Skims by Kim Kardashian. So she has a product. I don't know much about the product. If you look at social media, There's all these videos that are going viral that show you how to get these skim products from China and Amazon and all these places that are identical to hers, same material, same fabrics, like 1/3, 1/10 of the cost. No joke. So what do you think these young people are doing who are buying skims? A lot of them are still buying it, but a lot of them are just like, sign me up for 1/10 the price and I will just go and buy. A personal brand is great, even a corporate brand is great, but it doesn't make you invincible to all the basic business fundamentals. Everyone can love Elon Musk's Tesla. If someone created a Tesla tomorrow that was identical to his, feature by feature, color, spec, everything, no difference other than the logo, and it was 1/10 the cost, just as reliable, just as good, do you think people would be buying Teslas, or do you think they would buy the knockoff that's identical and people couldn't tell for 1/10 the price? They're going to buy the knockoff. You got to keep fundamentals in mind just in general when you're doing marketing. Marketing's great, but if you're forgetting some of the basics, you're not going to do well.
So as a marketer, when you're in that sort of situation, how do you combat knockoff companies? We see that even in our industry where a company comes up with a really great product and then there'll be international competitors to that. So how do you combat those kind of attacks?
One, you start going out everywhere and try to land and expand. I know that's time consuming and expensive, so you're doing geography expansion. Two, you got to figure out how you're better or if you're better. A lot of people who are copycats typically are missing some of the secret sauce. Maybe, it's how things are put together or the reliability, or they're missing some features. And showcasing and highlighting those things will help you keep a strong foothold on the market. The third thing you need to do is continually innovate. A lot of people just literally will knock you off when others start innovating and you just get stuck in the same way. For example, if you look at the electric car race, I know a lot of people are buying electric cars, but you know what they're doing now? Oh, I can buy these electric cars where it's electric, and if I want to put in gas, I can put in gas and it does both. They're like, I got the best of both worlds. City driving for that, long journeys, let me just use gas. And then you don't need two cars. So a lot of those car companies are starting to clean up and do quite well. But what did Tesla not do there? Tesla did not adapt. I wouldn't say they did not innovate. They've innovated in many other areas, and I bet you they could have done it. They chose not to do it because of their mission or their beliefs or the value system or whatever it may be. But that's the struggle. When people start adapting, it really does affect revenue. And you need to try to be ahead of them and build something that's more superior. It's not easy.
No, absolutely. And I completely agree. And I think we often see that, especially in our world where you can have a patent cliff and you enjoy that time. But once that patent expiration starts to come up, a lot of times these companies don't adapt. And more importantly, they get a little bit too comfortable. I want to make sure that we're mindful of your time. I have a couple other questions. I want to just shift real quick. We have also a lot of agency owners, but also marketers who, I guess, deep down in the heart, they're like, okay, one day I'm going to leave my W-2 job. I'm going to start my own thing. Not easy running an agency. No. I run an agency. It's very difficult. If you were to speak to a marketing agency owner today or somebody who's starting, what were some of the hard-earned and learned lessons you had when you look back at your time when you first launched your agency? And again, for context for people, Neil at that point had built a very reputable thought leadership brand. You had software that people were using that people were really loved. And so you had a lot more momentum than the average person. But if you go and start advising new agency owners, what are some things that you recommend in that first year of business that will set them up for success?
Focus on a vertical, like medtech or e-commerce or whatever they want. Focus on a vertical. The vertical could just be, I'm only doing SEO or I'm only doing paid ads. But ideally, I'm only doing SEO or paid ads for industry. And then eventually, let's say it's medtech. And then you're saying, I'm only doing SEO for medtech. Now I'm doing paid ads for medtech. And now I'm doing CRO and then email. And then you slowly add in all the services. It's too competitive to be a general agency. The second thing is you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Join agency groups or hire people who have worked at bigger competitor agencies who have continually gotten promoted. They'll know a lot of the mistakes you should avoid. If someone worked at a previous agency and they said they were the one who did improve or drove all the results, but they didn't continually get promoted, they usually aren't the person who drove all the results. They're just saying they drove all the results. People tend to get promoted a lot if they're the ones driving a lot of the results. Those are two big lessons. And the third is a lot of agency owners think about how do you just keep getting more customers? And most agencies have really terrible churn. What they need to focus on is land and expand. How can you get in the door and sell many more services? When you start getting a customer to pay you 3, 4 services, you'll notice the churn goes down a lot. You don't need as many customers. You just need to keep your customers, which funny enough is easier to do than it is to get more customers. But yet agencies focus on getting new customers instead of retention.
I love that. And it makes so much sense as well. Do you recommend when it comes to agency owners, this is a topic of discussion I've had with other agency owners, at least in our space, which is the idea of how much do you charge just to get in the door? And then should you charge less just to get that adoption? Is your advice to focus on a very specific niche? Let's say we'll run your social media ads or we'll do SEO, get in there, prove those results, and then expand from there?
Yes, you get in the door, you prove the result, and you expand from there. And if it's a big corporation, it's easy to expand because you can offer more services, and they usually have many different divisions. And they're also in many different countries, so there's so many ways to expand.
Got it. And then last thing, and then I have one last question for you. But when it comes to that kind of approach, and again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is that in our space, MedTech is very isolated. So a lot of things that are now extremely competitive to do. In our space, it's still like open field, like creating content, running ads, etc. Equally so on the agency side, because we don't really have MedTech agency owner groups, okay? When it comes to, again, if you imagine that you're starting off your business, do you recommend to agency owners to think about a simple month-to-month retainer that's easy for somebody to sign, or you get them locked in for a long term?
You need a commitment. You want annual contracts.
A full annual contract, 12 months.
Yes, they can pay month to month, but you should have annual contracts because marketing isn't a 1 month thing and you get results instantly. If they're not committed, it's not going to work as well because you're not going to be able to produce enough results in the first 30 days and most people are just going to leave and then it makes you look bad. And you should have transparency with the client, let them know all of this, give them proper expectations so they know when they should roughly start expecting some results.
Got it. I love that. Now, last thing, again, not everybody in my audience, at least in the marketing side, is going to start their own agency, but we have a lot of great people who listen to the show because they have aspirations to be a VP of marketing, a lot of salespeople specifically who want to get into the marketing side. When you look at your career in marketing, what were 2 or 3 books that had the most influence on your career as a marketer?
Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, because a lot of marketers just try to make things too complicated. It's a great book that is worth checking out. Another book that's worth checking out is Purple Cow by Seth Godin.
I love that book too. That's a good one. And then nowadays, if you think about leadership, is there a set of books or let's say a book that you feel that you often gift to people more often than not marketing related? It could be anything.
Yeah, a few books that I really love. Principles by Ray Dalio, The Dip by Seth Godin, Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki, Lean Startup by Eric Ries. But those are some of the books that I tend to gift quite a bit. There's a Traction. I don't know if you heard of the Traction system.
Yes, for EOS, right?
There you go. That's great as well because if you're under 50 million-ish in revenue, I think it's a great system. I think above 50 million, it's not the best system, but under 50, it's great to get started. But yeah, those are some of the books I would recommend.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think I'm so happy. It's been many years, but I think you're the first guest on any podcast I've had that mentioned The Dip. I feel like it's such an underrated book, The Dip by Seth Godin. I think it's fantastic.
And it's a short, quick read too. Like
it is. Yeah, it's super short. It's super short. Neil, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and spending some time with us. For those listeners who want to follow you, at Neil Patel across all platforms.
Yep. And then my ad agency is npdigital.com.
Fantastic. For those listeners who have been listening, go check out Neil online. Also go to npdigital.com and check their webinar section. They have some great webinars there and maybe see if they can help you with some of the services you need. I'm your host, Omar M. Khatib. This has been another episode of the State of MedTech, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.